Currently showing in New York and LA, but making its way out into the country is the latest from James Gray, Armageddon Time. Tell us about it, Christy.
Yes, James Gray returns to the kind of really personal, intimate filmmaking that he made his name on with films like Little Odessa and The Yard and Two Lovers. And then in recent years, he's gone on to make much bigger films like Lost City of Z. But this feels like a return to form for him.
Did they ever come to your house?
What do you do when that happens?
Obviously nothing, of course.
You think that's smart?
It is inspired by his own youth, growing up in New York, inspired by his own, something that happened with his own childhood. It's about these two young friends. One is a white Jewish kid played by Banks Repeta. One is a black kid played by Jaylin Webb. And they become friends in public school in 6th grade. And it's an awful time no matter who you are, but it's 1980 in Queens. And you can feel the flux that is occurring, both within our nation and within this school. You can definitely see where James Gray is drawing a line between Reagan being elected in fall of 1980 and what happened when Trump was elected. And there was a Trump tie here.
Yes.
Which
not just Queens.
No, yeah. And so it's about how they have this really nice friendship, but the insidiousness of racism pulls them apart. Like it can't just be a nice friendship. Even people who purport themselves to be liberal and progressive and open-minded, there's still not even a thinly veiled racism to the way that they regard this young friend that he has. So Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong are his parents. Anthony Hopkins is his dad. I'm sorry, his grandfather rather. Yeah. And it's about how they all shape this kid at this pivotal point in his life and how they project all of their hopes and dreams and aspirations onto him. And they pretend that they are open-minded, but they're really not. They have a very narrow view of what success means and what happiness means. And it's definitely not anything to do with this kid who is black and is poor and does not have any of the advantages that he has. And I liked it a lot. I like the conversations that they have. It could have been a very eat your vegetables movie, as we were talking about recently with, what were we saying was a vegetables movie that wasn't? Call Jane.
Yes.
I don't think it's an eat your vegetables movie. I think it's thoughtful. And I brought Nick with me to see it. And I'm really glad that I did, because it kind of feels like it couldn't be more timely, unfortunately, given the raging anti-Semitism that we're seeing throughout our country. And of course, in the last few years, we've had Black Lives Matter protests. And I think if you have a kid who is this age, it's a really useful movie to show him or her, to have that conversation about the way people treat each other. It sounds like it's heavy-handed and beating you over the head with messages. And here and there it kind of is. But then actors like Anthony Hopkins find such a subtle grace to the dialogue, to some lines that could have been really mawkish. There's this incredible scene, which if you've seen the trailer, I know you've seen, where he talks to this kid in the park about what happened when your friends at your new school called him a name. You've got to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, and you've got to be a mensch. And it sounds really cheesy. Like on the page, it could have been so cheesy, but there's a lot of grace to the performance. Jeremy Strong is terrifying as his father, as really abusive, physically and psychologically abusive father. So I thought it was really well done, really solid.
Yeah, I mean, it does hit on a lot of, political topics, but at the same time, it is very much, I think, the kind of movie that most directors get around to making at some point, which is the sort of like childhood reminiscence movie, your Amarcords, your Crooklins, your Radio Dazes. So this one, because it's set in 1980, it's very much about the politics of the moment. But it's also about, just the family dynamic and the fact that he allows himself to remember himself being kind of a shit, which a lot of 12-year-old kids are, which is very honest. There was an interesting comment I saw in the wake of the whole Kanye thing of late, where people said, if you're going to talk about blacks and anti-Semitism, you have to talk about sort of the history of who is considered white in this country, and so for a long time, Italians weren't considered white, and Irish people weren't considered white, and Jewish people weren't considered white. And by 1980, Jewish people were considered white, but black people were still very much not white. Yeah. And so even though you have this kid whose ancestors fled oppression in Eastern Europe, you know, he does now in 1980 enjoy a relative amount of privilege compared to this friend of his who's a good kid and a smart kid, but who just cannot catch a break, who like at every turn is having, you know, just shit thrown at him. But again, this is all woven within a sort of like childhood reminiscence memory piece. So it isn't just this like civics lesson. It is about coming of age and growing up in a specific time and place. And I think I'm not somebody really who loves the movies of James Gray. I have to say, like,
No?
I didn't see some of the early ones. I did not like Two Lovers. I'm not a big fan of like his epic stuff like Ad Astra or Lost City of Z, but this movie really landed for me. Like this one really felt like, okay, I'm responding to this. I'm finding this meaningful and moving. And yeah, it is beautifully acted. The kids are great. Anne Hathaway's really good, and Hopkins and all of the other adult actors. So yeah, I hope people check this out.
My main complaint with this is that it is so dark. Like Darius Kanji shot it, you know.
Oh, you mean literally dark? Okay.
Literally dark, like the lighting,
yeah,
or lack thereof.
Sure.
He shot also upcoming Bardo. I mean, he's like legendary cinematographer.
Sure,
but like it's really dark in a way that I think is maybe intended to invoke a sense of nostalgia, like almost like a sepia toned kind of look back without the feel good nature that comes with nostalgia. Yeah. But like really hard to see all the time. And I don't know if that was your experience as well, but like just going to a normal AMC, the AMC Century City, you know, big screen, I found like it was just needlessly so, like there was like a grunginess to it almost.
I mean, I saw it in a screening room, so I don't know if that would make a difference, but I mean, I think that, I mean, you know, and that this is kind of Gray's palette a lot of times. I mean, when I think about Two Lovers, I mainly just think about like how it's always overcast in Brighton Beach.
And like the interiors are all dimly lit in Two Lovers as well. I remember that too.
Yeah. So I'm not really sure what they were going for here, but I mean, I think that also, you know, there's also that thing about like, it's that pre-Giuliani period of New York, you know, the early 80s when things were still kind of like, you know, were a little seedier and you know, it hadn't, the city was in a bit of a slump overall. So, you know, I think when you try and capture that moment, you maybe dim the colors just to sort of convey that sense of like, you know, a lot of, you know, rotted out storefronts or whatever the hell it is that, you know, was happening at the time.
Yeah, I read an interesting Q&A with James Gray where he was talking about how he wanted to use a subway car. He asked to use an MTA subway car for one important scene between these two kids, and they gave him an old one from that period, but it was clean. And James Gray is like, this is not what it would have looked like. It would have been covered in graffiti, but the MTA wouldn't let them actually spray paint it, so they had to do it all in post. That's all digital graffiti that you're seeing in that one scene.
That's amazing.
And it costs like tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, I think the sense of place is really vivid. Banks Repeta is really great in this too. There's a great naturalism to it. So I'm saying a 7.5.
8.8. I was really moved by it, and again, maybe just because I went in with such low expectations because Gray's movies haven't really done it for me, but this one really did.